Jackson Rising on page 51. And it's all good if you haven't got that yet. But if you can, go ahead and support Black authors. It's a wonderful book. So in the process of the people reflecting on why the institutional context in which they are located has prevented them from being able to adequately meet their need for high quality and affordable goods and services, the revolutionary or progressive organizers have the opportunity to pose questions that encourage the people to think critically and interrogate the structural shortcomings of capitalism. I thought that was profound because, you know, we've been talking about understanding the common needs before, you know, you make your corporation or your cooperative official. People assemblies, understanding what really plagues your community and how do you address it in a collective way. So a lot of those things that we would see as cons or areas of improvement more than likely have some connection to a structural disorder. And so the shortcomings of capitalism, I felt like was a very, very profound way to put it. And I wanted to kind of open it up to the collective. How do y'all feel about capitalism in general and in your life specifically? What are some shortcomings that you've noticed that you wish would change? And it's popcorn style.
Capitalism is the engine to self-destruction and human annihilation, I think, because it's always going to prey on the weak, and then when it only has itself, it's either going to look for to deplete something outside of it or take off weak points of itself. So capitalism is an evil system.
I'll build on that by saying I think capitalism requires that the people who don't have are seeking to get into that like extractive point to where they can like live off the work of others. And that kind of like perpetuates it.
Okay. Yeah, I also would agree that there is, on one side of it, a feeling of opposition to humanity, sometimes morality when it comes to capitalism. And there's also a perpetual greed magnifier. You know what I mean? I guess they're one and the same in terms of they're not really a distinction. Like the anti-morality and the anti-humanism it shows itself in greed, and that greed is very common in various aspects of our systems, from politics to the health, the pharmaceutical industry, to how we deal with other countries, how we deal with resources of the land, how we deal with our own, like the lesser of our people. There's a lot of opportunists in each one of those sectors. So yeah, okay. And then what are some, and to be fair, what are some positive aspects of capitalism that we can point out?
Like the stimulus, like when they got all the hundreds of trillions of dollars to the people.
Straight up, when you get that money in your account, I would challenge that. I don't know if that would be capitalism. Is that capitalism? Giving money out to the people.
Half of America didn't get that. Half of the country, half of the planet didn't get that money. That money was for the United States of America or whatever. And they got theirs off top and they skimmed that off and whatever. And even still, I'm pretty sure half of that money still hasn't been to the people who it's due to.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. It made me think, like, capitalism is one thing, and then you have socialism, which is another structure that is often vilified. But socialism involves redistribution of wealth. And so the stimulus checks were a redistribution of wealth. So that's why I say, is it capitalism? But at the same time, being in a capitalist country, I think there are incentives to give money in certain instances, and the pandemic was one, to keep the capitalism going, right? So, okay, any other positives for capitalism that we see?
I don't know
say,
if this is positive. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say positive would be I wouldn't say weak, but I would say underprivileged being able to strengthen themselves within that system and make it to a higher tier in that system.
Okay, like the ability to progress your life, opportunities.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, yeah, I appreciate you guys' insight. And we can move into the reading. Again, page 39 in Collective Courage. All right, so P's and P's describe these organized Negro communities designed to prove that the Negro was fit to be a free man, an impressive undertaking, both in the goals set and the dedication, zeal, and vision of those who devoted themselves to. So to me, that reminds me of how we have a glass ceiling over us as a community a lot of the time, and that our organization often becomes intimidating because our perception by others prevents them from seeing us getting to a level that is more advanced than them. Often was the case. I've learned a little bit about American history to the point of understanding the race relations are very complicated, and that you have certain classism that plays a part in the propagation of racism. So you have certain people who have money, and then they might be considered the white part of the white community, but then you have whites that are not a part of that elite, that are just working and doing what they do during a time of slavery and Reconstruction, where Blacks were seen as less. So when we started coming together, it threatened those who maybe seen us as less than, because they were fed propaganda by those in the elite that we were in opposition to them and working class on the working class level, which was not the case. But it created a lot of tension, which stimulated KKK attacks and different things like that. So to me, it's like us organizing is a statement in and of itself, not meant to be confrontational, but it often can be. And then I want to skip down to where it says, while the examples show that there were benefits from and positive aspects of these communities, they were also largely based on paternalistic relationships between white benefactor managers and Black residents. So to me, that reads that we had to often show our autonomy or challenge for our autonomy. And we had to often even hide amongst these organizations that had large white populations or large white leadership, so we wouldn't get attacked. Isn't that a mind? My mind blew when I really learned about that, because it's like we want to evolve, but in the progression in the face of a larger systemic stagnicity is threatening, right? So it's like, no, y'all can't progress and continue to move forward. Y'all got to have that validation of the right complexion for protection, and that is antithetical to progression in many ways, because if it was more of an equal playing field, I think less resources would be wasted in the false competition of the working class, which is just the vision propagated by the higher levels. How do you guys feel about the perception of you know, the division that is propagated in the working class back then and even now? Do we see any connections of miseducation that causes division in the media, in our interpersonal relationships?
A lot of times they want everybody to be individuals and not collective, come together collectively in the workplace. And I think that's a way to keep to not let if everybody's agreeing that the pay is low, but they're telling everybody not to talk about your pay, then that leaves you that without coming together collectively, then it's just like a fight on your own, and then they could just squash you and fire you and or whatever they decide to do, rather than the whole workforce coming together and coming against the pay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Brother Greg. Do you mind reading the bottom of page 40 where it says mutual aid and beneficial societies? Excuse me.
Okay, the bottom of page 40. Oh yeah, I can definitely read that. Can I just say, like, before I get into that, I thought it was really interesting that, like, even back then, when we're trying to do like something radical, folks are trying to like put their own kind of extractive spin on it. Like, for instance, they were talking about how a lot of those communities ended up trying to make like gentlemen farmers out of ex-enslaved people. Let me know if you can't hear me. But like the thought that like folks perceived us as like needing to do more than we already were doing, and like, let me just go into this. It's hard for me to like capture my feelings on that. But it just feels weird that like a people who like help build so much are still perceived as like needing to work on themselves and improve themselves, when it's like, wait, we just improved this nation. You're saying like yeah, I'm sorry. Let me get back to this. So mutual aid and beneficial societies. Collective practice and leadership among independent African Americans was more evident and more prevalent in very successful African American mutual aid and beneficial societies. The majority of early African American cooperative activity revolved around benevolent societies, beneficial societies, mutual aid societies, and more formally and more commonly, mutual insurance companies. Many of these societies were integrally connected with religious institutions or people with the same religious affiliation, and they established educational, health, social welfare, moral, and economic services for their members.
That's cool. So right there, when we talk about mutual aid and beneficial society, this is the gambit or the array of the types that you would see at that time, you know, and I don't know if we can improve upon that list, but I think it's a good place to start, you know, like the areas in which the religious institutions stepped in back then. Like I would say they have an influence today, but maybe not as much as they did. And so, you know, who's filling that void now? It seems like, you know, we have a bunch of nonprofits that are helping out in some ways. And then, you know, am I missing anything? Are there any other institutions that are helping with educational, health, social welfare, and moral services? Is it the government? You know, who else is filling that void?
The county, you got social services.
Mm-hmm. Do we feel like these areas are sufficiently covered by the government?
Yeah. If not, they're nonprofit. People who've been in the community and want better for it. But that still comes from the government, right?
I'm sorry, what was that last part?
Don't they get funding from the government and other sponsors and stuff?
Yeah. And donators and philanthropists. I feel like these are wide areas, right? We have education. I mean, in Oakland, we're dealing with the school closures right now, which is something that I've seen a lot of collective energy on, because it's important. You know, when we talk about the prison to the school to prison pipeline, like this is it right here. Like schools get closed, you concentrate students in to smaller amounts of schools. Kids have to travel more. Already don't have resources. Like I grew up on the bus. You know, I didn't have moms didn't start dropping me off at school till like she didn't have a car for majority of me being in school. She didn't get a car till like 11th grade year. You know, so that was my experience, and I know it was an experience for a lot of kids. So I say that to say, when you start closing schools, you make it harder to get to school, then you make it easier to not go to school, and then you make it easier to fall into, you know, situations that will make it hard to continue your life in a progressive way and be a contributing citizen. So it's like, I feel that the government does provide some resources to help those in need, but then I also see them take away major resources too. So it's like giveth and taketh away, like in a sarcastic way. Like I don't appreciate that, because it's almost like playing God in a sense. But then whose fault is it? Because, you know, we allow these things to happen too. And what about these other areas? Do we feel like the government is doing what it needs to for our health? You know, recently, you know, we already know what's been happening lately.
Hell no, we should still be quarantining.
But
Okay.
I mean,
Sorry,
go ahead, Greg.
No, please go ahead.
They do, but within the framework of a certain paradigm, right? So they'll put like a waste plant in your neighborhood that pollutes your air so you get sick, or they want to cut a bridge to, like, you know, mess up
The real air.
displaced people. And then with the other hand, after they've polluted and like destroyed your home, they want to give us, you know, nonprofits and health clinics that just are going to like give us this paradigm of health, where all health means is either to cut you up or give you a pill, and don't give you other paradigms about holistic medicine. Or they give you education. Yeah, they may give you free school, but they teach you a paradigm that teaches kids to submit to a system as opposed to think and create and innovate. So they do provide with one hand, but for you to be able to fit into the system that they created for us.
Most of the stuff I learned educational wise, I learned at home. I didn't really learn anything in school. Most of that stuff, like when I looked at that stuff, I'm like, are they serious? It's so basic.
Yeah.
I think that the same like categories of things that like our folks were using mutual aid for back in the day, like what we said, clothing and shelter, support, social welfare, that's still happening today, right? Like the place I work, Sustainable Economies Law Center, has like witnessed a whole bunch of mutual aid organizations during the pandemic, and folks helping each other pay rent, get food, pay bills, and all of those kinds of things. And that's not necessarily the government. Sometimes the government does put grant funding in, but like as someone who's trying to get grant funding, that pathway is like so difficult most of the times. It's like most of our community aren't necessarily going for that kind of money. After reading this, section, I looked online to see if there were like federal sick benefits or death benefits. Nope, 2022. And
Life
so,
insurance.
But what I'm saying is like there's still portions of the things that we need to like feel comfortable that the government still isn't providing. We have to provide ourselves. Like we'll learn later in this book about the Black Panther Party and how they had cooperative institutions helping to fill in some of those gaps, and how those institutions inform the government, which like give us like duplicates of those today. But yeah, I mean, like from my perspective, I'm seeing like people helping people more than ever, even though we're on Zoom, and like this idea of mutual aid and cooperation is starting to come up more and more, like seeing like the disgusting profit margins of the vaccine companies and like seeing all of this wealth shift into the hands of a few. Like, I really think folks are trying to get outside of this system we've been locked into.
I think for me, the difference is decision making, like the difference in decision making from mutual aid and cooperative, if like the people who participate make decisions, as opposed to nonprofit or folks who are doing charity. You making decision from your ivory tower in your boardroom about needs that people you haven't even met have. So I think once you localize decision making and decentralize and put that in the hands of folks that are impacted, that's, I think, where the paradigm shifts.
All right, let's move to page 42, midway on the page where it says Black mutual aid. Black mutual aid and beneficial societies spread rapidly in the early 1800s, especially in the North and in urban areas. Although more common in the North, many Southern cities such as New Orleans, Charleston, and Richmond also had these societies. By 1830, there are more than 100 mutual aid societies in Philadelphia alone and about 30 in Baltimore. African Americans were members of 108 Black mutual aid societies in Philadelphia. Du Bois focused much of his research on the various societies in Baltimore. Du Bois described the business methods of beneficial societies, a group of people who know each other through their neighborhood or church or other organization join an organization to provide a service or set of services. Yeah, I thought that was pretty profound. That, you know, like you said, there were a lot of, like you said, Greg, there were a lot of members, mutual membership organizations starting, mutual aid membership organizations starting during the pandemic because there was a need. And around this time, there was also a need, I'm sure, early 1900s, late 1800s. It was hard, you know, it was hard. And so folks found ways to come together, and then to have Du Bois right there in the thick of it, like seeing the importance of that collaboration and that spark that was happening and deciding to document it, I think is profound to me. Because I'm sure like everyone else, he was trying to figure out, you know, how to get his survival on too. But, you know, he also saw that this was something that needed to be documented for whatever reason. Like he saw that this was a necessary thing to try to encapsulate. Maybe he saw that, you know, in the future, like we would need that inspiration, like that we did this before and we can do it again. And these people didn't have major degrees, and, you know, they weren't business majors or had their own nonprofits. No, they just were in the same neighborhood, had a common concern for each other, and came together and said, hey, like, let's try to make life easier for each other. Like, how do we collaborate and do that, you know? And that was like a common thing. 108 mutual aid societies in Philadelphia. Like, you know, that's a good amount.
I think it's really interesting how in Philadelphia, that was the place that had the largest concentration of free Black folks before the Civil War. And I, like, the thing about this book is like, there's kind of like snippets that you can go and research outside of this. And I find myself always doing that. And so I learned more about like what was going on in Philadelphia, that it was the largest concentration of Black folks, which is why the start of the Black National Conventions was there, because that's kind of like, that was our freedom hub in a way. And you can, I don't know, it's what else did I want to say? I think that's it. But yeah, just like many interesting things we can look up. The last thing, so what's interesting about the Black National Convention and how it kind of like led to many like cooperative and mutual aid things is that it was generated from the need to protest a riot that happened in Cincinnati, where a bunch of European Americans basically eviscerated a part of the town where we were. And there was like national outrage about that. And so like the politics, like what's going on the ground and the way that we're moving economically has always been like linked.
Mm. Right. Politics without economics, it's empty. You know, that's what we read yesterday in Jackson Rising. Like you can't separate the two, because if you do is just lip service, you're just talking. If you're just talking about, oh, we need to change this, we got to change this, then you're missing the how. How is that going to happen? You know, where is these funds going to come from? You know, politicians have to get paid as well. Who's paying them? Of course, the government pays them, but at the same time, you know, lobbyists are a thing. They make deals, and those deals could be for the benefit of the people or against the people, you know. And I appreciate Jackson Rising coming together and saying we're going to provide our own politician, you know, who's in alignment with what we're doing. I think that's a great way to do it. And I also think we should get our funds together and put our money where our mouth is for specific issues that really affect us. And compete, if you will, with those who have big bags in other areas. But we have big bags as a people too. We just got to tap into it, you know?
Yeah, so it's really cool because like at the top of the book, it talks about how we were pulling our money to buy each other out of slavery. And at the bottom of page 43, it says that those who were free before the Civil War provided the only economic base the African-American community had immediately after emancipation. The mutual aid societies provided a structure for their collective efforts. And the way I see that is like the folks who had money and were able to amass it, like came back for folks and was like, all right, let's do this. And I feel like that's what we have to do now. And it can't be like, yeah, I mean, that's it, period.
And on page 45, it says the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief Bounty and Pension Association took on what was essentially a poor people's movement, demanding pensions for the formerly enslaved to compensate for years of unpaid labor. The association also provided medical and burial assistance. In addition, it offered a democratic structure in which local people had control and a voice at a time when Blacks were practically disenfranchised or on the verge of becoming so throughout the South. I think that's powerful. Again, like these examples of just stark opposition to the status quo of what was going on, like the gall of this organization to be like, y'all owe us pension. You know, this is reparations basically, but like they gave it, look, like you can call it reparations, but we saying pension. We put in more than 8 hours a day. Y'all able to pinch off y'all check and create a nest egg for yourself. Why don't we have the same? We just supposed to die? We just supposed to die without any kind of safety net? You know, that's, you know, and I think verbiage is important, right? Because you start using pension, it's like, yeah, it's the same language as if you were to have a salary position. And we're using that term intentionally, you know what I'm saying? Not reparations like you owe me in this, you know, like, please give me back. No, like, I worked, I deserve this. You know, it's just simple as that.
Bro, this is really interesting. And this is like our 4th year doing the book club. And Repaired Nations is like always like touching on stuff that has happened in here and like our everyday work. In California, there's a reparations task force that's doing research and trying to figure out like what would California do in that kind of situation. And our organization has been invited to help do a listening session. So that'll be forthcoming and we'll be getting community feedback about that. But just like, you know, the same things are still happening, right? And we're still trying to figure out like, how can we truly as a nation get past this like abomination and like what's necessary? So if you go to the state website, you'll be able to go through the hearings and see like the different research and stuff that's being presented and might be included in this report. Really interesting stuff. And I'm gonna have to leave to go to another meeting. I'm sorry to have to like come and dip so soon, but I just wanna say like the women in this book are so inspirational, and like cooperative movements have always had like strong women leaders, and Maggie Lena Walker is one of those. and the ability to like gather 50,000 members and $400,000 of assets, like back in the 1900s, is a feat that I think some of us would have a hard time doing even now. When I'm reading this book, I always have like an inflation calculator up to see what the like modern day figures are. And that $400,000 of assets then is $11 million today. And so like no small potatoes, like really, really doing it. And you'll find a lot of instances throughout this book where like our folks like had it. But for the like external pressures, like a lot would have been different here in the state or the US.
Give love. Thanks, Greg, for your insight and tying in, things that are happening in our communities that we need to be aware of. And it's all good. You got to go. We wrapping up anyway. Yes, we had another amazing week, y'all, of cross-pollination and insights into how we can work together and learning from, Sankofa, learning from the past so we can continue on in the future, not falling into the same traps and evolving the blueprint that was given to us. So I will see y'all next week on Monday. Same Black channel, same Black time. Peace, y'all.
Peace. Have a blessed weekend.
All right, y'all have a good weekend.
All right, you too.
Have a good one.
All right. You too, man.